Well, after 2 weeks of having citizen meetings or constituent meetings, whatever you want to call them, in 24 counties of Iowa, I'm glad to be with you back here in Washington, carrying on the Senate's business and the people's business here in the United States Senate, and be on webcast with you, my weekly webcast. So it'll be a few weeks now before we have another break, and I'm glad to answer your questions. So I appreciate very much people sending questions by email, Twitter, or by Facebook. So I'll go immediately to the questions. From Facebook, Randy in Cedar Rapids asked me, quote, please point out why EPA approving E15 in cars after 2001 is significant, end of quote. I'm glad for that question because it's very important to agriculture, very important to jobs in rural America, very important to a clean environment, very important to our national security, that we're less dependent upon foreign sources of oil, and very important to agriculture and jobs for economic development. And right now, if we just stayed with E10, which is a 10% mixture of ethanol and gasoline, and we don't go to a 15% mixture of ethanol and gasoline, and doing it for all the cars we can do it, and the decision last week very much broadens the number of cars that can use it. As you say in your question from 2001, the reason it's important is because we're up against what people in the industry call a blend wall. In other words, we have the authority to produce at least 15 billion gallons of gasoline from grain. After that, it's going to have to be from non-grain cellulose. But up to 15 billion gallons, we can never use 15 billion gallons of ethanol if we're only mixing a 10% mixture. So the EPA studied for a couple years the possibility of doing it. Did it comply with the clean air laws? And then the Energy Department made studies of whether or not it was detrimental to the engines of certain cars, and this all met approval of the environment law, met the approval of not doing damage to cars. And so by going to 2001 at E15, we're going to be using much more ethanol in our gasoline, and the mandate that we have for oil companies to mix ethanol with their gasoline will be able to comply with that up to E15. The next question comes from Lance in Underwood, asks, the senator is giving these updates, not an intern. Is that correct, Senator Grassley? The updates that he's talking about are the updates that I was probably giving all last week as I was going around the state of Iowa in those 24 counties to hold meetings. I gave an update on Twitter of what went on at the various meetings, the number of people that attended, where I was, and things of that nature, some of the issues that come up. And obviously, since I only have a person with me, and that person's a caseworker, I don't have interns with me as I travel around Iowa. And if you'd followed me on Twitter, you would know that only I could be doing the tweeting that went on last week. And I enjoy doing it. I enjoy taking advantage of every method and procedure that I can to communicate with my constituents, because at the end of this process of self-government, any way you can keep in touch with your constituents is a pretty important thing for anybody that's a representative of the people to do. And I consider myself a representative of the people of Iowa. I have to tell them what I'm doing. I encourage them to correspond with me and communicate accordingly with me. If you hold on, I'll be glad to, at the end of this webcast, do a Twitter for you. This week, of course, most of the attention this week is going to be on the State of the Union message. We will start consideration of what is called a continuing resolution which is the decisions we'll make beyond March the 4th, because the executive branch can't spend any money after March 4th without us passing a bill into the rest of the fiscal year. So that'll be what we'll be spending our time on now. Thank you all very much for participating in this webcast, listening to me. I invite your questions, comments next week as well. Those of you who sent in questions this week, we'll answer the others by mail. And now I'm going to go and show Lance in Underwood that I am tweeting myself when it is now 3:35 and 20 seconds, and I will say to Lance at Underwood, I just misspelled, as I do too often, at Underwood, that I am doing my own tweet. It's sending, and pretty soon it will say it's sent here. Successfully posted your tweet. Okay. Thank you all very much for participating.